Any ideas you have to develop local tourism here? I don't know the stats, but I'm sure we don't have. I mean, the number of tourists who visit Kazakhstan is probably much, much smaller than the number of tourists going to Uzbekistan. And as the famous 2006 movie goes, we're not happy about that. Yeah. So give us some advice.
It's something that my colleagues and I talk about a lot, because especially if you're thinking about the regional competition, we've got some pretty impressive neighbors, right? Kyrgyzstan has some of the most spectacular alpine scenery in the world. Uzbekistan has some of the best preserved Islamic architecture in the world.
That's right.
Turkestan is great, but it can't compete with Bukhara, right? Kosai Lakes is great, but it can't compete with Kyrgyzstan. Mm-hmm. So what is the unique? What's the business term for this, right?
What's the competitive advantage?
That Kazakhstan has to offer, right?
Differentiating.
That unique aspect that Kazakhstan has to offer. And more what I think it is the contemporary culture here, is the contemporary cuisine, the contemporary art. There's no other city in Central Asia that is going to have two contemporary art museums like Almaty. Mm-hmm. Has these two museums opening up this year that has an exciting...
the one opened
Selini and Almaty Museum of Art.
Right. What's going to be the key difference
between those two museums? Well, the Almaty Museum of Art is very much based in Nurlan Smugul's personal collection, mm-hmm. which has a lot of brilliant Soviet artists and some artists of the contemporary scene. Selini is much more grounded in the current contemporary artistic community, mm-hmm. In a more kind of radical decolonial approach.
Right.
But I think they're going to complement each other very well. But the bigger picture, I think, is that the fact that both of these institutions are coming here in 1 year is saying, like, Almaty has arrived as a contemporary scene. With the New York Times, mentioned where we got it on the 52 places to visit this year, we were talking about neo-nomad cuisine, about the dining cuisine, the dining scene here. You can't find that anywhere else in Central Asia. So Kazakhstan just has to lean into that. It has to lean into culture in general, because it's really frustrating to me that if you look at what is prioritized now by most tour companies and tourism authorities here, it's ecotourism, it's nature. Of course, Kazakhstan has amazing nature, but I think a lot of that grows out of this kind of inferiority complex, this feeling that we don't actually want to show our real culture. We don't have anything to show. So another program that I worked on, which was just a proposal, was developing rural tourism. And this goes back to what I was saying about getting people outside of Almaty. Mm-hmm. Anywhere else in the world, if you go to a village, you can find a homestay and you can stay with a local family. In Kazakhstan, there's 1 or 2 villages that qualifies as that.
Which ones?
Sati, next to Kosai Lakes, Ashi, and Altanamel. They've tried to develop a few in the Altai in central Kazakhstan. But that's nuts that in a country this big, with this much to see, there would be only 2 villages where you can find hostels. So I think it would be amazing to put more emphasis on the auls, on the villages, on what they represent, because they really are the heart of Kazakh culture. And yet if you're a tourist and you want to go stay there, there's no way to do it, mm-hmm. right?
Speaking about the New York Times piece, I actually been following Craig Mott for quite a while on Twitter. I mean, I remember he was at Flipboard for some time. I actually used the product back in the day. I mean, it was an amazing iPad app where you could, it was an iPad magazine. It's sort of like Google Reader, but with better design. You added a bunch of like blogs you follow, and then it created beautiful tiles.
Yeah.
And then I saw this piece in New York Times written by Craig Mott. It's like, and I look at the recommendations he has, like, okay, like this must be coming from Dennis. Tell us more how this piece came
he was a guest.
about.
He was a guest on my tour, and one of the more memorable guests, because he's just a very curious, smart guy. Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, like, he has a brilliant newsletter that he sends from Japan. He's walked all over Japan. He's a man after my heart. He's walked all over the hills of Japan looking for pizza, Japanese pizza, right? Like, like my kind of guy.
He's basically Dennis King of Japan. Huh?
I would aspire to be the Craig Mott of Kazakhstan.
Right.
So we clicked and stayed in touch. And when he freelances for New York Times, and I don't know exactly how it got put together, but he reached out to me for some ideas to put in it. So I gave him, because he hasn't been back since a few years ago. So I gave him some ideas about what I thought was exciting that was happening here.
And it was his second trip, I assume.
Well, we hope to have him back.
Yeah. Nice.
Because we're still trying to build buzz about the cuisine scene, the cultural scene that's happening here. So I think it'd be great to have journalists like him back here. Those kind of moments are so important because I think that in Kazakhstan, people lose sight of just how hard it is for the Western audience to hear about Kazakhstan, right? Your average Western consumer knows Borat. Mm-hmm. We can talk about the Borat project, right?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
But at a certain point, that's kind of it. And so you have to think about ways to break through. What are these kind of storytelling devices that you can use to break through? The Borat project was one. This nomadic cuisine, I think, is just a really interesting story for people, that you're taking this ancient food of nomads and doing really exciting things with it. Finding some stories that make sense for an outside audience. Because Kazakhs are very good at telling Kazakh stories in Kazakh terms to other Kazakhs. But that external communication is a challenge.